Hi again, and welcome back to the Learning to Code by Writing Space Invaders course. This is the second part of lesson number 10, where we've just completed the code for firing 5 bullets at a time, but we just need to go through and test that code, and then we're going to go through a whole process of identifying bugs and fixing them. So let's get straight into the code. So make sure you load your lesson 10 software, and we'll go straight over to Tick 80. So let's just have a quick sensibility check on this. So if we go back up to the top of our code, so we create our player ship variable, and that's as it was before. So that all the player ship movement bits should still be fine. We've got our player bullets array, which is we're setting to this empty table. We've got our max player bullet set to 5, and we've got our game needs to be initialized set to true. So we will initialize the game, and then we will do our check player fire, our move player bullet, and our draw player bullet. So we're calling all the right functions in the right places. So we just look down quickly in here. So our check player fire function, again we've just been through that, so that's all fine. Our move player bullet function, so we've updated all of that. And our draw player bullet function, we have updated all of that. Okay. Oh, and there we missed a bit. So there we go. This bit here I had left in place. So I need to take out that block of code, because that's the old code which we don't need anymore. So let me just make sure I took that out of the move player bullet one, so that's all gone. Okay, so that was one bit which we missed. Okay, so and our draw player bullet, our draw player ship is as it was before. So our initialization system, so we have our initialize game function, which calls our initialize player bullets array. We have our initialize player bullets array function, which is looping through all the bullets and making each one equal to a new bullet object. So okay. So hopefully we should be able to make that run. So let's press our Control R function with our fingers crossed and see what happens. Okay, so we started off okay. With it running like this and not giving an error straight away, that means that the code we've typed in is what's known as syntactically correct. In other words, all the code we've typed in makes sense to the computer. We haven't missed off any end statements or brackets or things like that. So the syntax or the way we've structured our code is correct. We now need to make sure that it actually does what we wanted it to do rather than something we didn't want it to do. So let's just check if our left and right buttons work. So our ship is still moving, and it still stops at the edge of the screen. So all of that's still working. And let's, in the moment of truth, we'll see if we can fire a bullet. So our bullet's firing. Let's see if we can fire a couple of bullets. And they're all firing. Okay. So if I now see if I can do how many I can get on here. So 5 bullets, and it doesn't fire anymore. So it looks like we have got a working system, which is quite surprising actually, because things don't tend to work first time after you've typed in lots of code. But anyway, if you haven't got a working system, don't worry. It's going to be simply a typing error somewhere, or one little missed bit of code somewhere in the system. So I'm going to put a couple of bugs in my program, some of the ones which you're probably going to have if you have got an error coming up. And I'll show you how we can go through and find those bugs and fix them. So give me a couple of seconds and I'll put some bugs in the software. Okay, I've now put a few bugs in the code, which are, some of them are typing errors, and there's one or two are what we call logical errors, where we've actually made, although the code is correct, it's not right. And we'll see what it means in a second. But if I try and run now, Oh, just got to click in here a second. So if I try and run the code, we get an error coming up. So this is telling us, and I've turned the cursor on so you can see where I'm pointing to here. So it's telling us here that the title of our, so this first bit here is just telling us that the title of our game is Space Invaders. So it's saying in this block of code, on line number 98, it's found a close bracket, or saying it was expecting to see a close bracket near an equal sign. So we need to go to line number 98 in our code. So if I press escape, we have up in the top corner here, we have a go-to function, which is this little one beside the hamburger. If I press that, we can say, let's go to line 98. And we have here our code. And what it's saying is that it was expecting to have a close bracket near this equal sign. If we look at what's going on here, this is a, let me just get out of that. I just press escape key to close down that go-to box. This should be a test to see if a value, if bullet fired has the value false. But if you look at it, what it's saying is that that equal sign doesn't make sense here, because what we're doing is we're actually assigning a value to bullet fired, not testing its value. So all we would need to do in here is we're missing out the double equal sign. And what it was basically saying, the reason it said that it was missing a close bracket, it was saying that it thought that we should have had a close bracket in there to finish off that expression, which of course was not quite what we wanted, but it did tell us that there was a problem in this specific area of the code. So that's the first bug we found then, is sometimes when you're going through, especially at the start of your programming career, the difference between an assignment, so where we're using one equals to put a value inside a variable. So remember, this is putting the value false inside the variable bullet fired, or whether we are testing to find if the contents of our variable are the same as something else. So this is an actual expression, this is a test. So we are asking it, so equals equals says, is the value of bullet fired the same as false? So does it contain false? This is a test. Is it equal to? Okay. So sometimes you find those around. We simply just put one equal sign instead of two, or two instead of one sometimes. So let's now come out and let's see if we can run that again. So we should now find that once we've fixed one error, this message here should change. If it doesn't change, then we haven't fixed the first error yet. So we've now got it telling us in line 140, it was expecting to find a closed square bracket near the closed normal bracket. So it's looking like we've missed off one of these brackets. So again, that's on line 140. So let's go into our code again and use our goto function. So we want to go to line 140 and press enter for that. So let's have a look at this line of code there. So it's suggesting that we've missed off the matching bracket for that. And if you look just here, that's exactly what we have done. So we should put that in. And that should then clear that error. So again, if we type run, we should get a different error message coming up. So here we go. So we're saying that on line 189, it was expecting an end statement to close the function. So in other words, it thinks that we haven't closed one of our functions correctly on line 189. Okay, So let's have a look and see what that is then. So line 189 is the very, very end of our code. So that's probably not where we were looking for really. So let's go back to our error. And it's saying here that it thinks that the function at line 136 is the one that wasn't closed. So let's now have a look at line 136. So sometimes what happens is that the error you make, some of the code looks okay until it then hits the end of the file, when all of a sudden something doesn't match up. So one of the end statements doesn't match up here. And what it said there is that we didn't have enough end statements in our whole code, and it thinks that it's the function at line 136, which is the one which hasn't been closed off correctly. So let's go to line 136 and see where that is. So use our goto and line 136. So our draw player bullet function, let's just work through this bit by bit. So if I press enter to close that bit. Okay, so we're saying here, so our function, we have a for loop and an if loop. So our if loop, so if then, we do some code and we end. And this is where it's handy to have these little notes that tell us. So I know that this end statement is supposed to match up with that if statement. So the next end statement should match up with that for loop, and you can see there that it's missing off. And again, I had left this comment in. I should really have taken that out so that it wasn't there at all. But that's really where it's come in then. So we've in effect got our end statement here. If you remember how when I type in a function, I always type the function name, well, the function declaration in first, and then I immediately put in the end of the function and label it as the end of the function. So again, this tells me then that this end is supposed to be going with this function start, so that's the end of the function, so that we're missing an end in here. So at the moment, it's just our for loop that doesn't have the end, which we can put in there. Okay, so again, these little comments, sometimes it may seem a bit tedious to type them in, but as you can see now, it does have its use, and it can make, whenever you end up with lots of bugs, and again, we still haven't got to a massively big program, but once you get to really complicated programs, you'll find that these become almost invaluable to help you fix bugs. So that's the missing end fix then. So let's come back out to our console and see if there's anything else in here. I can't remember how many bugs I did put in, but let's see what's happening here. Okay, so we have a number of things going on. So the way this works is that sometimes you'll get more than one message come up, and what's happening is it's doing what's known as a stack trace. So we have a stack trace back here, and what it does is it finds where it thinks there's an error, and it then has a look back, because remember, we have a system where our functions are calling other functions and so on. So if we go down to the very bottom of the trace, that's in effect where the code started. So it said here, there's an error in the function tick. So whenever the function tick was running, it came up with an error. If we then go up one error, so remember this is one error, these two lines here. This is the error that came before that, saying that there was something went wrong inside the initialize game function. So the error before that then, and you can see there, remember our tick function calls the initialize game function. So we had an error in our init player bullets array function. So again, our initialize game function called that, but got an error. And then this function, it has this error in it near our for loop. So what it's saying is on line 175 in our for limit, in our for loop, it's saying that the limit, so in other words, one of the ranges, remember we say for bullet equals 1 to something. So the 1 to something bits, it's saying that one of those limits wasn't a number. So let's have a look at line 175 and see what's going on there. So again, we use our goto function, line 175. And what it was saying is, one of these two values it didn't recognize. So 1's obviously fine. And this one here is simply a matter of a misspelling. So the actual variable, if we look down here, no, it's not down there, but the actual variable is max player bullets. So we missed off an S on that one. So simply mistyping a variable name. And what the system was basically saying was it just didn't recognize what that was. It didn't recognize max player bullet. So let's see if there's any more errors in this. So let's come back out again. And let's run that. So we haven't got any errors popping up, which means that our program, or all of the code in our program, has been typed incorrectly. But let's see what happens when we try to make it work. So our left and right still works, but our fire button now is not firing any bullets. So we have what's known now as a logical error. So it's not a syntactic error where we've actually physically typed the program in incorrectly and missed out brackets and stuff like that. But we now have an error where the computer thinks that our code is as it should be, but it doesn't actually do what we want. So the problem now is in what we've asked the computer to do, not how we've asked it. So let's have a look inside the code and see what's going on. So if we go up the top here again, we know that in our game loop we have a number of functions. So the idea was that we split our code up into functions so that we have small blocks of code handling each part of our program. And we've got a problem now where our bullets are not firing. So the most probable place is that our check player fire function has a problem. And again, we're saying now another of the advantages of using functions and breaking it up nicely. We're already honed in to probably about 10 lines of code where our problem may lie. So let's go and have a look at that check player fire function, which is down here. Okay. So it's really a matter of working through this now and trying to discover which bits are making it not fire buttons. Sorry, not fire bullets, sorry. So we have created this local variable. So we know that that local variable, bullet fired, it is a flag that tells us whether we have fired a bullet. And the idea there was that as we're looping through each of the bullets in the player bullets array, once we've found one and fired it, we then don't need to continue going around and firing any other bullets, so we can sort of skip over things. So bullet fired is initialized to false. In other words, we haven't yet found a bullet and fired it. So we then come down and we start doing our tests. So we do a test to see if the fire button is pressed. And we know that the fire button is number 4. So it could have been that we were maybe testing button number 5, which would of course given us the wrong response. Our Z key wouldn't have worked. But we know that button 4 is the correct one. We're then doing a for loop, which is working its way through all of the bullets in our player bullets array. So it's counting from 1 to max player bullets. And we know that that for loop structure is correct because we've used it in other bits of our code. So we now come down to our line. So we know that the actual firing of the bullet takes place in this block here. So we have a couple of if statements which could be the ones which are stopping that bullet from firing. So if we look at our next one then, we're saying then if bullet fired equals true, so if bullet fired is true, then we can go off and do some of our firing code. But that should be then where our problem lies. Bullet fired tells us, so bullet fired will be true if we have fired a bullet. We're testing here, we're saying we can only fire a bullet if bullet fired is true. So in other words, we're only going to fire another bullet if we have already fired a bullet. So kind of see that that's the logical error we have here. And again, if you remember back, that when we first typed it in, that was actually set to false. So that's our bug. We've simply got the wrong, you call it polarity, on that test. So our test should be, if we haven't fired a bullet, so bullet fired has the value false, then we can go and check if we need to fire a bullet. So hopefully that's shown you then that although the line of code worked, in other words, the software was happy that there weren't any typing errors in that line of code, it didn't actually do what we wanted it because our logic was slightly incorrect. We'd got the wrong way round on our test here. So let's come out of that and let's see if we can run our code and see what happens. And we now have our system debugged. So if you're getting some of these error messages coming up, do have a look through. So always look at the first error in the list and whatever line number it says. It tries to work out what it thinks was wrong, or at least give you a hint as to where it is. Okay? And usually at the moment our errors are going to be simple typing errors or missed off bits. So you've seen that we've got a missed off end statement or a missed off bracket or a misspelled variable name or the wrong capitals on a variable name, things like that. So have a go through yours, just tackle whatever error you get, tackle that first, and if what you do to fix the error doesn't change the error, then you haven't fixed that one. You've got to keep on going with that one. Okay? But at the end of the day, if you go and check out the website, and again the links are in the YouTube description below, there is a full listing, in other words all the code typed out for this particular lesson, and that code will be the code that I have currently in mine sitting here. So if you are still struggling to get that fixed, just have a look at that code, compare it with what you have in your TIC80 file, and really go through it. You can see here programming is very, very strict on how you lay things out. You can't, there's no margin for error in the spelling you use and the number of ends and brackets and everything. It won't be kind to you. It will just simply throw up an error and say I can't run. So do make sure you go through it character by character just to make sure that you haven't missed a very simple end of bracket or something. Okay, so running that, we now have our working multiple bullets. So we are ready to go on to the next bit of our code. But first of then, let's make sure that we save it. And again, make sure that you get to the working version when you save. So I'm going to save lesson 10. Remember, we did save it with a different name a little while ago so that we didn't lose our work. But I'm going to save this now as lesson 10. So that's lesson 10 finished. It already has a version of lesson 10, so yes, this is now the proper version, the finished version of lesson 10, so yes, I do want to overwrite that. And we're now ready to carry on with our programming. So, well done for sticking out with that. So lesson 9 turned into lesson 9 and lesson 10, and I think we're just hitting the 2-hour mark on that whole block. So well done for sticking with it, and well done for getting it working. If you haven't got it working, hopefully you now know what to do, but stick with it and you will get it going. Don't worry, you will get it going. And I will see you in lesson 11. Bye for now. Don't forget to visit the course pages for this project. There you'll be able to download the code for this lesson and get lots of extra hints and tips. You'll also get access to all my other programming, electronics and gaming projects. All the links are in the description below. For more games programming, electronics projects and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit my website.